So I'm reviewing Maestro, a 2023 film directed by Bradley Cooper and also starring him opposite Carey Mulligan. Cooper is one of the co-writers as well as one of the producers, along with Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg, as well as other people. The movie is one of the 2024 Best Picture nominees at the Oscars. It's a biopic about Leonard Bernstein, one of the most famous American composers and conductors. I would compare my experience to watching this movie as being similar to that of watching Barbie for the first time. I had to watch it in spurts. It does kind of drag on. It seems like for a big portion of the movie, nothing dramatic happens. It's one of those movies that starts with the end. It begins with an aged Bernstein late in life being interviewed in his home, and then he kind of recounts the rest of his life beforehand. The movie, for the most part, picks up at the start of his career, him filling in as a conductor at this orchestra at the last minute. The early part of this movie is in black and white. There's a lot of dynamic camera movement to convey or reflect the energy, his creative energy. And compare that to the end of the movie, later in life, there's a lot of static camera shots, long distance shots. And it bookends with him at that interview. One thing I hadn't really anticipated is just the prevalence of Carey Mulligan's Felicia. She's a big part of this movie. I would say it's almost like less of a biopic and more of a love story. She is a prominent figure in this story because she had been a prominent figure in Bernstein's life. I would say really the driving force of this movie as a story is just the duality of Bernstein as an artist, as a man, and as a father, husband. He discusses the difference between composing as an introvert and conducting or performing as an extrovert. And he's kind of balancing the two. There's also the duality of him in his private life, his sexuality. He's truly in love with Felicia, but he's also shown very early on having a dalliance with the man, and that continues throughout the movie and his life. There's also the duality of him as a public figure, beloved and respected by many, and as a father, husband, the conflict that he has as a result of his life choices and whatnot. So I feel like if you're a theater kid or a fan of musicals, if you haven't seen this movie already, you might enjoy it more than the layperson. I would definitely categorize myself as the latter. Aside from West Side Story, I'm not super familiar with Bernstein's body of work. His music is played throughout the movie, but unless I had subtitles on, I would not have known. Some positive things. I appreciate the performances. Cooper and Mulligan are great. I know there's been some controversy in the prosthetics used to transform Cooper into Bernstein. I think it's a bit distracting at first, but the nasal voice, always having a cigarette in his hand, I think it's pretty convincing overall. I also appreciate the subtlety. I think that's more of a trend in movies these days. Maybe decades ago, whenever there's a transition to a different time or place setting, there'd be a title card or a text on screen, but there's nothing like that in this movie or any of the other Best Picture nominees that I've seen, for the most part. Bradley Cooper and the other filmmakers are kind of trusting you to pay attention to the aging on Bernstein, paying attention to the fashion, the hairstyles, the music that's playing in the background. I can see why this movie is critically acclaimed, but I can also see why among non-critics it's rated as slightly below average. I would say maybe pass on this movie unless you're, like I said, a theater kid. I would suggest maybe instead watching Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story from a few years ago, or maybe the one from the 1960s that had been released following the success of the Broadway musical. Those movies will let you really experience the work of Bernstein. And if you feel compelled to learn more about the man behind the music, then certainly check out Maestro.